Jeff Adams is a 3-time Olympian, 5-time Paralympian, and 6-time world champion.
Well, I'll tell you when I first knew. When my boy said, "Dad, cut off these brakes. I want to go faster." Just never realized he meant faster than everyone else in the world.
At McDonald's, we share the belief that anything's possible when you have a dream.
And it's a true story. You know, I grew up on a farm. I grew up baling hay and milking cows. But I spent most of my life chasing after that moment of excellence when everything comes together. My life is going to be changed today because I'm going to win a medal at the Olympics. We went into the back straight and we hit our wheels as hard as we can to squeeze every last ounce of energy we can out of our racing chairs. And with 300 meters to go, with 1 lap to go at the Olympics, I hit my wheels as hard as I could and felt my right wheel break. And I will never forget the feeling of looking down and seeing pieces of it on the track. And the feeling of what I knew was going to be the best day, turning into such a horrible moment. And so I made my decision that day to finish the race. And I finished last. I finished limping across the finish line. I finished very far from happy. But I finished. And I lived a moment of excellence that had nothing to do with the Olympics, nothing to do with the medals, nothing to do with the crowd. It had to do with keeping my personal message consistent. I work hard to finish what I start. They happen every single day that we look within ourselves and find the courage that we need to face up to the barriers that are in our lives, because we all have them. They come in all kinds of different shapes and sizes. And the things that happen to us, the good things and the barriers, often are outside of our control. But the one thing that we always control every single time is our ability to react. We're here today to share our stories. And in doing that, we celebrate each other, we celebrate our differences, we celebrate our diversity, which is what makes us so strong.
In terms of sort of my calling, you know, as I dance with the dark, which is what I like to say, in terms of my calling and really learning how to harness the shadow energy, I was one of those people who came to leadership kicking and screaming. It was kind of like the spirit was calling and I had caller ID. Right? And I was, oh, I'm not getting that one. But I had an incident where a man attempted to take my life. And literally, we were at point-blank range. I was shot at point-blank range. I should say shot at. And I remember seeing the flash of the bullet leaving the chamber. I remember seeing the smoke of the gun. But I can't tell you where the bullet went. What I can tell you is that I felt a beam of energy literally come through the top of my head and flow down in through my feet. And though I don't know where the bullet went, I got the message. And so from that moment on, I became really clear that my purpose was to celebrate, empower, heal, and transform humanity. And I was to work at the intersection of arts and culture, social justice, and personal transformation. And I've had the privilege to do that work in communities all over the world, to use my art as a vehicle for social change. There are days when I do not want to do it. Anybody know about those? It is often thankless work, invisible work, but necessary. I'm building the spiritual will, I believe, to help take our country to the next place. And I'm doing it by engaging and supporting the empowerment of the hearts and the minds and the spirits of everyday people who live, work, move, and have their being on the front lines of our community, you know. So What does success mean for me? Because I think this conversation and this question is, you know, about how do we move through challenges to find success. Success for me is about being in alignment with my vision, my mission, and my purpose.
I decided to create a technology firm, technology risk management, professional services firm that understood the value of hiring people with disabilities, and disabilities, severe disabilities, people with intellectual disabilities, traumatic brain injury, paraplegia, quadriplegia, MS, MD. We're just a very blind and deaf. We're a very diverse organization. I created as a for-profit, and I did that deliberately because I believe that you can make money and do social good, and I think it's very important that we continue to do that. We are a multi-million-dollar company. We've had our struggles with our cash flow. I've decided I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm definitely projecting abundance, and I finally figured out how to run my company 10 years later. I didn't have a college degree. I've made every mistake that in the book, but I feel so blessed with this walk. I feel so blessed, and the employees that work with TecAccess are amazing. And some of my employees, for example, Rose was born with cerebral palsy, which is lack of oxygen at birth. And Rose, when she lies down flat, she can only blink her eyes. But let me tell you, Rose is amazing. Don't pity Rose, she's amazing. She cannot speak, but she uses a head pointer, and she commands the computer. She's a brilliant writer, and she really has a lot to say, but she just communicates differently. And I have story after story like that. Who are our clients? We deal with the multinational large companies. The Cannons, McDonald's is a client, Dell, HP, organizations that a lot of times people trash because they're big, bad, multinational corporations, but people make up corporations. And the people I deal with in these corporations, they're pretty amazing, and they want to make sure that people with disabilities are included in the conversation.
Diego's the next speaker, and he just got in, so he's just acclimatizing. So he was really curious about what to talk about today, and one of the first things he said was all the people that brought me here. And I was really struck with it. I said, it's so much like the Latino and Asian families. It's always remembering to honor all that brought us here. So let's give Diego a wonderful hand.
I grew up in Ecuador. So when I grew up, I grew up in a dictatorship, tanks around, very different. People forget what that was like 40, 50 years ago. So when I was about 21 years old, I was running one of the first privatizations in Latin America. And the transformational moment there was that we would be driven down to this guerrilla territory. And the reason why it was a guerrilla territory was there weren't jobs. And so there wasn't any place to work. They just closed down another factory or farm, and there'd be more guerrillas. And what we ended up doing was bringing a recycling plant there that took sugar cane, squished the sugar, and took the pulp and made paper out of it. You know, that was an early green project. I didn't even know it was green back then. And what I learned out of that is I might be good at what I do, and I'm pretty good at finance. I'm pretty good at some stuff like that, but it's what you do with it. I mean, you could take electricity and cook dinner, cook a man. The question is, what do you use it for? And there is so much skill set and so much human capital here that can be used in so many creative ways. And I think that's the big difference, and that's why I came here, because you value human capital here. You value the importance and the transformational value of it. And it was here at SVN that it was the last transformational moment that I've had in my life, which has ended up consuming the last 3 years of my life now, I realized. Someone said, well, why don't you take it the next step? Why don't you play big? Why don't you think about how to do systemic change? Yeah. I've spent many years working in large parts of the world recreating economies. Why don't you do that inside some of our urban economies? And so we created a firm, and that's why I'm actually here. It's called Green Space Development. And what we do is we have two sides. We help develop nonprofit centers in communities. So we'll do anything from a little 12,000 square foot green grocer in the middle of where there's no food to right now we're working on a 500,000 square foot city block in the South Bronx to bring economic development, a nonprofit center, and groceries. And on the other side, we have a different part, and what that is a asset management firm to raise $200 million to fund these things. And so what we're doing is telling people, pension plans, very large groups of investors, saying, these are very safe places to go. You might not make a lot of money, but these are very safe places. So using our skill, which to then facilitate that path. And I think that's what SVN does. They have one foot in the community and one foot here in their capital or other people's capital and making that path. And so I think that's very important. To build community, you have to take personal risk. It's what you do, right? It's that transformational moment, and it's doing it with passion. That's what's going to make a difference.